Well, welcome everyone to this town hall of the Urban League, Jacksonville Urban League Center for Advocacy and Social Justice. And our focus tonight is on dealing with the crime that's occurring in the city that has a long history. We've had ups and downs with it, but it seems to be on the upswing, and we have some folks here tonight that have had some success with dealing with issues like this. And we also have many in the community who are working in this area to help improve safety. And we are looking forward to getting their comments towards the end of the program after our guest, Joe Givens, who is a professor at Loyola University of New Orleans. He's a longtime community organizer, and you'll learn more about that in a video that he is going to introduce, and we will play for you. And then after that, we'll open it up for questions. I did want to introduce some of the people who are with us tonight. First of all, Eddie Compass, former police chief of New Orleans, who worked closely with Professor Givens on the program you'll see tonight that was so successful. We have Octavia Holliday from the State's Attorney's Office. We have Jacqueline Small, Zoe Samuels, and Megan Schutt and Sophia Berger, who are interns at the Center for Advocacy and Social Justice. And I also see that Solomon Crow, who's our community engagement director, is on with us as well. Deborah Thompson, from the vice president from the NAACP. We have several people from the State's Attorney's Office, the Department of Justice, U.S. Attorney's Office, Frank Talbot, and Khalila Escalera. Those are just a few of the people who will be with us. I also see Father Eibach from the Diocese of St. Augustine, and there will no doubt be others as we move things along here. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Joe, to kick things off.
Thank you, Dennis. If you can see behind me, it's windy, it's raining, and I'm not going to, I know I don't have to tell people from Jacksonville, Florida about windy, rainy, hurricane kind of weather, so I won't make that mistake. But let me say that I really appreciate, Dennis, the opportunity to talk just a few minutes and to share and to have my partner, Chief Eddie Compass. We know that we're not Jacksonville, we're in New Orleans. And there's a organized principle that says that the further you away from the problem, the easier it is for you to philosophize about the problem. And so we're not in Jacksonville. We know you've got your unique people, personality, politics. We're not going to propose or present any proposals here tonight. We're not going to describe anything as the plan. We're going to tell a story of what happened in New Orleans some 20 years ago, and recognizing that much like Jacksonville tonight, Eddie, we're back where we were in 1990, where violence and crime is out of control in New Orleans, as it is in Jacksonville, and as I believe it is across the country. But we believe that the story is an interesting one, and so I want to take you to 1994, 95, when we started. New Orleans has always had the dubious distinction. I don't know if dubious is the right way to describe it, but the distinction of being at the top of everything that's bad and at the bottom of everything is good. um, including issues relative to public safety. And in 1996, we had over 500 murders in the city of New Orleans. And at that time, we had a similar conversation like we're having here tonight. We had that conversation in New Orleans. And people will ask me, what, well, you said you fixed the problem in New Orleans. Well, we had great success at that time. Things change, and once you know that once you've swept the kitchen doesn't mean that you don't have to sweep the kitchen again. So we are back to where we were then. But I think the story is one that that describes the kinds of things that many cities have to consider when they're looking at peace. And that's what we were looking for. We weren't just looking for public safety. We thought that there was a difference between public safety and having peace. And from a spiritual perspective, I remember one of our presiding bishops said that peace was being in right relationship with each other and right relationship with God. And at that time, that's what we were seeking to do, develop relationships within our communities, relationships between churches, people, neighborhoods, law enforcement, and above all, the government that was responsible for making sure that we had a safe environment. So before you start the video, again, we just want to tell our story. And at the end, we'll answer any questions, and then we'll listen carefully to your discussions tonight. And maybe we might find something that we can incorporate from your efforts in Jacksonville. So we think we're sharing stories tonight. So Eddie, before they start the video, would you want to add anything to what I've said? Chief Compass?
Yeah, basically, one thing, I don't know if they had this problem in Jacksonville. We had the most corrupt police department in the United States. We had over 300 policemen fired out of a 1,700 person organization or incarcerated. We had drug gangs that were actually working with police officers who were doing contract hits. So public perception was at an all-time low, and public relations at an all-time low when we actually took over and started this program. When the FBI took over, there was like a handful of people that was in a crime-fighting arena that they trusted, and fortunately, I was one of them. They watched us for over 2 years, and I was in charge of street crimes. And me and another sergeant, Louis Dabdu, one of the guys from the FBI, said, y'all are the only two that we trust, because y'all name has never come up in any type of bribes, payoffs, or cover-ups. So that's how really bad it was. And so, we're going to talk to you about some of the things we did to basically build that back up. And fortunately, uniquely, I came from public housing. So I had a lot of credibility on the streets, and I went to St. Augustine High School. That don't mean a lot to y'all, but that's like the top high school in the state of Louisiana. So that boded me very well. Plus I had a karate program, and I had a partnership with the Nation of Islam. So they respected what I was doing. So I had a very unique group of people that was supporting me, people that usually weren't on the same page on many things. The one thing that they all agreed upon, that we had the right plan, the right people in place to fix what was wrong. So that's about it.
We'll see you in 20 minutes. Dennis, it's on you then.
Okay.
Violence is an emptiness inside. An emptiness so painful that it produces outward expressions. An emptiness of God's presence in people's lives.
Violence is a problem that seems to have no boundaries. It can occur in streets, in schools, in homes. Some people feel that violence can stem from a lack of faith and a sense of hopelessness. Walking against this tide are those who know it doesn't have to be this way. Across the country, people of faith are working to fight violence in their communities. They are making progress in places like New Orleans, Los Angeles, even in small towns. They are peacemakers.
When I first started living in this community, it was one of the most beautiful places that you would want to live in Orleans Parish. You were able to walk from one neighborhood to the other without the fear of becoming a victim of robbery, a gunshot.
We began in the mid-'80s to face perhaps the most difficult period this city has certainly faced in this century, perhaps in our history, when the bottom literally fell out of our economy, when the price of oil became significantly depressed. We lost jobs, we lost people, we lost faith, we lost hope. It was in effect a boiling cauldron in this community.
They stopped and pulled 3 guns out and put one in my head, my brother's head, my mom's head, told us to drop all our bags. I was scared. I thought I was about to die.
I was held up right in front of the school. So then it just dawned on me how close I was to dying.
I have 120 funerals a year, and a good half of those funerals are from young people. But it's a way of life. It's unbelievable.
36 years ago, Martin King came to New Orleans with 100 ministers, had a meeting at famous New Zion Baptist Church here in New Orleans. That community is in Central City, New Orleans right now, and is plagued with crack houses, dope dealing, and violence.
I'm scared to walk out my door. I'm terrified. I don't know what to do.
I was ready to throw my hat in. And as I did so, some words came to me that I'll never forget. The problem isn't out there. The problem isn't where you don't want to be, or with people who you don't like, or people who upset you. The problem lies within. And so being at peace within and knowing the deepest truth that our God does love us.
By the early 1990s, New Orleans was feeling the effects of the recession, drug violence, and crime. Within New Orleans' church-going community, people had had enough. In early 1991, 3,000 people gathered to form a group designed to change things through prayer, pressure, and action. They called their group All Congregations Together, ACT for short. New Orleans hasn't been the same since. ACT has become a federation of 60 congregations of church-going New Orleanians determined to speak with one voice about crime and violence. The congregations together represent about 150,000 people.
It's brought together people from every kind conceivable background, with rich and poor, with black and white, Jew and Christian, old and young.
They're faith-filled.
They're the people who work, they're the retirees. They're active in their churches, they're probably active in social organizations. It's the people who are on deacon boards, they are the people who are on PTA boards. They are the backbone of this community.
These are people for whom church isn't just an hour on Sunday. Church is the central institution in their lives outside the home. It's where they go to school, it's where they socialize, so it's only natural that the church provide leadership in stopping crime and violence in a troubled community.
What a great day for us to be in the house of the Lord this morning, amen?
They have hope. They want to do something. They feel that it's their responsibility to do something. That's what God is calling them to do.
What makes ACT unique is a structure that assures that its agenda is tightly focused on what the membership itself wants to accomplish. They are adept at staying focused on their goals.
The body of Christ.
In 1994, a 4-year effort by ACT to introduce community policing to New Orleans bore fruit. Community policing is a new philosophy being adopted by a number of police departments nationwide. Its purpose is to make the police more a part of the communities they serve. Captain Ed Compass headed the community policing effort in New Orleans and is a member of ACT.
ACT has been extremely instrumental in getting community policing in New Orleans. In the area which I took over, St. Mary the Angels were instrumental in helping us solve the crime. In the Florida development, which is near St. Mary's the Angels, they had 23 murders. With the help of St. Mary the Angels and the ACT organization, we cut the murder rate from 23 to 4, and overall crime, 47% in the first year. The next year, we came right back in the Florida development and cut crime another 59%.
Community policing meant, in part, listening to the community, and in particular, listening to the young people who are often at risk of becoming victims of crime.
All right, y'all be cool, man.
This happened to me about 5 years ago. We went to the shopping center to go shopping for Easter. And while in the mall, we felt that we were being followed, but we didn't pay it any mind. My mom decided that it wouldn't make any sense to catch the bus home, so we walked. And we saw some people who were running across the street, but we thought they were gonna keep going. But they stopped, put guns to all of our heads. One to my head, my mama's head, and my brother's head, and told us to drop our bags. All we could do is drop them. My brother was so scared that he didn't drop his stuff. My mom had to knock the stuff out of his hands. How would you feel if you had a gun pointing at your head?
The individuals that attacked the young lady, they're predators. Drug dealers are cowards. They're cowards. They try to intimidate you. They try to scare you into submission to them. When I deal with drug dealers behind closed doors, they cry like babies. Bad as they won't be out there with them big nines and big gold medallions, when they go to jail, they cry like babies. They rat on their mamas to get out of jail. They have no courage. They have no honor. And I'm tired of these people dominating our city.
Community policing came to New Orleans from below, not above. It came because organized people of faith acted. ACT did not quit after they succeeded in getting community policing. They continued to target basic issues of public safety and other quality of life issues that they felt were key to bringing peace to their community. Joe Gibbons is the executive director of ACT.
Members of a congregation will have one-to-one conversations with other members of the congregation and members of the community, and they will say, what is it that you think that we need to be looking at as a faith-based community? Issues begin to surface and stories begin to surface that give people an idea of what are the major problems or concerns in that congregation. Through our one-to-ones, we found that people were not only afraid of those things, but more people were directly affected by what they call nuisance crimes.
And 13 years ago, we had about maybe 40 or 50 abandoned houses and lots. And in this same neighborhood today, we have over 190 abandoned lots and abandoned housing, which really causes it to escalate crime, drug trafficking, prostitution, car theft, fires, people losing hope. When you live next to an abandoned house and people are afraid to come out in the daytime or people come out at nighttime, it's a frightening thing to be by an abandoned house.
Stores on street corners were selling alcohol to kids.
The kids who loiter outside of these neighborhood drugstores that sell alcohol they contribute to the violence.
We found that kids could not go to neighborhood parks because the parks were not only in disrepair, no goals and glass, but these were places now used primarily by dope dealers.
So they end up in the streets, or they end up playing basketball on basketball goals that are provided by the drug dealers.
People behave in violent ways because they are hurting inside. And sometimes they're not even aware how much they are hurting. And they feel that if they hurt somebody else bad enough, their hurt will go away. Their revenge will be taken care of. And so if they're hurt, they hurt back. But it never ends until they make the journey within. And in making the journey within, find the real source of their problems. And so today, more than ever, religion and faith has to be a part of our society.
ACT's most ambitious venture thus far is the planning of a large annual public event with the mayor and other city leaders in attendance. The event is called an Action.
An action is a public meeting where proposals that are developed by people in our congregations are presented to public officials. Commitments are required by public officials to those proposals.
At the planning session a week before the big meeting, ACT officials urge their membership to get as many people as possible to the event. Much of ACT's influence stems from their ability to put hundreds of bodies in front of city officials.
That number, we want people standing from the rafters here. We need 700, 800. You got to remember, this is a federated action. Have we ever had under 1,000 people at a federated action? Do we have our work cut out for us next week? All right? So you got to bring 10 people. You got to call them. You got to coach them. You got to talk the night before. You got to explain them the issues. You got to bring 10 people.
We know we're going to have the mayor there, several city council people, the police officials.
St. Peter Claver, 200 for St. Peter Claver. Central, 50 for Central.
If the church is not packed, then we lose. They will believe that they don't have a reason to respond to this issue or to this group of people.
St. Simon Peter, 50.
It's very common for people to come to City Hall and say, I'm the president of XYZ organization, and this is what we want.
St. Peter and Paul.
We have 200 members.
25. Good number. Let's give them a round of applause.
They really have very few members. They really have no support base behind them.
30. All right, let's do it, Angel.
Some of our people don't want to come to meetings at night because they're afraid. They don't want to come in a neighborhood that's not safe. Yeah. So they don't come out to meetings. They don't come out to events.
The final irony: would the fear of the crime that gave rise to ACT in the first place keep their participants at home?
Angel, how do we look? 200, 225, 255, 455, 50. Oh, you got it already. 845. All right. I love it. Great. Good job. Let's do it. We can do it.
845 people were pledged, but how many actually showed? May 29th, the big day arrived.
Oh, the action was great. It was great.
Sign me up for the Christian Jubilee.
The volume of people. Oh, God, that was really, I said, God, people are truly coming together.
For I've been changed.
No one comes to an ACT meeting to showboat. No one comes to an ACT meeting because they want their face on the camera. These are real meaningful meetings, and they're really accountability sessions.
May we bear witness this holy night and go forth empowered in strength, and that gift of love, and that gift of life, and that gift of being brother and sister for each other. We ask this in your name. Amen.
The gentle tone of Father Bart's opening prayer notwithstanding, this action is the kind of pressure politics mayors and city council members get all the time. The difference? This time, it's tightly organized and highly motivated people of faith.
How big is the problem? I would like to ask you to please stand and remain standing if your answer to any of the following questions is yes. Do you hear gunshots in your neighborhood? Stand, please, if you hear gunshots in your neighborhood. Has your home been burglarized? Has your property been vandalized? Has your automobile been stolen or vandalized? Are there drugs being sold in your neighborhood? Do people loiter in the streets or on the corners in your neighborhood unnecessarily? Is there a store or bar in your neighborhood that allows loitering? Selling alcohol to minors? Or otherwise contributes to problems in your community? Is there blighted property in your neighborhood that is being used for illegal activity? Look around. Just about everyone is standing. We cannot accept this. Can you?
We want you to propose a law similar to one in California that permits every man and woman and child in the neighborhood to collectively sue a property owner on the grounds for causing public nuisance. Proposal number 2.
ACT proposed that owners of abandoned property be publicly called out with signs in their yards, that people who buy drugs can have their cars seized and sold, that laws against loitering and selling alcohol to minors be strictly enforced. But they weren't done yet.
Everything starts in the home. As parents, you have to instill in your children. You have to instill in your children certain values and certain morals. Fathers, if your sons want to sell drugs, let them know that they can go to school and get a degree in pharmacy. We have to teach them this. Lastly, I would like to challenge each of you to ask yourself this question. Am I going to sit in this pew and just listen to what everyone else has said, or am I going to put my foot down and realize that I can make a difference? Thank you.
Oh, God, when that young woman spoke, it almost blew me away. You know, out of the mouth of babes, out of the mouths of babes.
When you teach people that they have a voice, that 2 or more gathered together have a bigger voice, that hundreds gathered together have a really big voice, and that 1,000 gathered together will turn any politician's head.
First of all, let me give honor and obedience to God because we are in his house tonight. I tend to enjoy them, not only the meeting, but all of the comments and the conversations you have with people after the meeting about problems in their neighborhoods. I came home with a whole pocket full of work last night, a lot of little notes and photos and neighborhood problems that people want some attention on.
There were close to 1,000 people at this meeting. They left this meeting feeling like it was the best that they'd ever been to.
You know, you can have all kinds of different peace. There's peace that you have in church, peace in the home, but the peace of a child to be able to play basketball, the peace of a mother to just sit on her porch and enjoy the cool air. That's peace.
New Orleans still has problems, but most agree that ACT has made a difference.
ACT, I think, has been one of the main players in the comeback of this community.
Still
The ordinances proposed by ACT were drafted by the City Council and supported by the mayor. Some of the effects were seen almost immediately. Owners of blighted properties awoke one morning to learn that their name and address had been posted on a sign on their own property. Casual drive-by drug buyers were shocked when a small drug deal resulted in the immediate seizure of their car. Abandoned lots were in the process of becoming parks. Mayor Morial kept in close contact with ACT members, even attending its youth action.
Girls, you got a girlfriend, a boyfriend who owns a gun or uses dope, dump him. Dump him. Boys, young men, I'm going to tell you something, straight up. And I tell all the young black men this. You are not a man because you carry a gun, you use dope, or you can father a baby.
But ACT members were discovering something else, something inside them that was the real payoff. They were becoming leaders in the faith, linchpins in peacemaking in their community.
People don't become leaders overnight. I think it really builds confidence to be surrounded by other people who have faith in you, have faith in themselves, have faith in what they're doing. We had one very involved leader, he has since died, and he said, I never, ever dreamed I'd be sitting in the mayor's office telling him what I wanted and he'd be listening.
I believe that ACT wants a city, a neighborhood, a community that is based in the kind of faith-based principles that we all share as a faith-based community, a peaceful community, an educated community, a nonviolent or as safe a community as we can have. We also want a community that is driven by the vision of faith-based people.
Do we have a responsibility as Christians? I believe this lies in our responsibility as being human. So all people are called to live as God has made us to live. And yes, we have a responsibility to make a difference. If we are going to find ourselves and find that sense of who we really are and well-being. So it's not simply a matter of being Christian. It's a call that everyone has.
To Sister Marianne Hebert, it is clear that what ACT is doing is what Jesus would be doing.
Jesus went out on the streets and did one-to-ones. Jesus went out on the streets and confronted the powers that continue to abuse people. Jesus went out and walked with and shared the lives of the people that he was with. Jesus would be on the streets confronting the same issues that we're doing. I think what we're about is living that gospel today in St. Peter Claver Parish and St. Raymond Parish and all the ACT parishes and trying to do exactly what Jesus would do, to make a quality of life better.
There's a quotation from the book of Isaiah in the 58th chapter, from the 11th to the 12th verse that says, "The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land. He will strengthen your frame, and you will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose water never fails. You will be called the repairer of broken walls and the restorer of streets with dwellings." You know, I'm sure Isaiah didn't write for the city of New Orleans, but he could have.
So obviously,
this story was told from the perspective of describing the role of faith, the role of churches, the role of faith community. It was done commissioned by the U.S. Conference of Bishops in 1997. And so that's why the emphasis. You might have recognized the mayor in this clip. The mayor of New Orleans at that time was Mark Morial, who's now the national president of the National Urban League, president of the National Urban League. And you would also have seen that of the triumphant of the participants, the role, the church had a role of holding forth a moral standard.
This book, call 1-800-2.
And the mayor was apparently willing to engage the faith community. And you saw Eddie Campos, of course, and the law enforcement. This was an ideal situation for us to be able to have that kind of engagement where Mark respected the right of churches to project the vision and to be a part of the process, and to have someone like Eddie Campos and a new generation of police officers who were cleaning up the department, as Eddie said earlier. I'll say this last thing, and then then you guys can ask Eddie and I in questions for, I guess, 10 minutes, and then we'll begin to start listening at your deliberations. You know, I noticed that there's a representative from the U.S. Attorney's Office on this call, and in recent years, the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Orleans, it may not have been solely in New Orleans. Eddie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that there was an initiative called Brothers Keeper. We called it Crescent City Keeper, and our U.S. Attorney at that time was Ken Polite. Ken is now the Assistant Attorney General over Criminal Division in Washington. But that Crescent City Keepers was an attempt to move back into a kind of partnership where churches were a part of recovering and saving the lives of young people who had been identified by the U.S. Attorney's Office as likely to be dead or in jail if something didn't change in their lives. So now that we've got seemingly, I think we were talking about that earlier, about the resources that are now coming down for community policing and initiatives like Crescent City Keeper and Brothers Keeper. We have everything to hope for in terms of being able to turn back the clock and things that were obviously effective. So I'll stop there. And
I just have one thing to add, Joe, if you don't mind. Just have one thing to add. What we did from a law enforcement perspective was an anomaly. We won a crime reduction award 2 out of 4 years, and the 2 years we didn't, when we came in second place. And we had the lowest number of arrests in the entire city and the largest reduction in crime. And there was a weed and seed grant that was out there, and 80% was into the weeding part and 20% was in the seeding. And after I read that grant, it wasn't mandated, it just was traditional. So I flipped it. I put 20% in the enforcement and 80% into the seeding. And we basically had the largest reduction in the nation. It was so great that Vice President Gore came and gave us a national award. And then when he got rid of apartheid in South Africa, they sent the South African Police Department to come meet with me and spend 3 days with me to basically try to replicate what we were doing in public housing. So we were the national model. Plus we were featured in Time magazine also. So we definitely set the tone for the entire nation. So that's about it.
So Dennis, I'll turn it back over to you and your team to monitor questions, if there are any questions. I can't hear you, Dennis. You're muted.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. I'll repeat. Thank you very much, Chief Compass and Professor Givens, for being with us tonight and sharing your story. It's a poignant story and an awesome one. And I know that we can repeat it here. I really do. Somewhat, one way or the other, it's got to happen. The old ways aren't working. We have to look at other ways. And actually, this way has a lot of history itself. So, but let's open it up for questions. We have one from Father Ibach of the diocese. What is the situation now in the city, and why can we do this in other cities with a high crime rate? How can we do this?
Listen, that organization no longer exists. In 2005, the city, of course, Hurricane Katrina destroyed 800 churches, 200,000 homes. That devastated the organization. There was no organizing base, but we've begun to rebuild organizations like that. And I said earlier, just because we cleaned the kitchen once doesn't mean that we don't have to sweep it again. We know we have a crime problem now. We know that, especially around the pandemic, that cities like Jacksonville, like New Orleans, are all experiencing this, this uptick in crime and violence and murder. And so we have a lot of I think, opportunity now with the Justice Department that is sensitive to what can happen with regards to resources. But to answer your question, you have an organization in Jacksonville. I think it's iCare. iCare basically uses the same model of organizing that we were describing in this video. And so there are organizations like this that come under the auspices of national groups like the Industrial Areas Foundation, Faith in Action, DART, which is an iCare affiliate in Jacksonville. So it's a question of will. Octavius and I were talking the other day about the political will. Obviously, we had the political will. We captured the political will in New Orleans at that time. That is essential, and that I think is the role of the church to force the political will to get something done. Right? Okay.
Yeah, I saw a question about the U.S. Attorney's Office. They were instrumental. They facilitated the Weed Seed Grant. A young man named James Carter was my contact person. He later became a city councilman. Now he's a very successful attorney. And then I looked at another question talking about what we're doing for the actual social inadequacies from an economic standpoint. We did something that was extremely unique. I had a summit with all the drug dealers and gang members, and I basically told them, anybody that want to get out the game, I'm gonna get them out the game. I said the only exception was if you were a child abuse or a rapist, you wouldn't be able to get into this program, because I had people that was ready to donate money and donate resources, but that was one of the stipulations. What we did, I had given them basically tests to find out what their proficiency was in. Then I had a job summit. I had a lot of guys that I grew up with at St. Augustine High School that had businesses, and I brought them in to do internships with some of the kids. I got the Sewage and Water Board to come and hire guys for labor positions. I had the electrical union come in. I had the carpentry union come in. And basically everybody that wanted a job got a job. Now the ones who didn't, I just basically kept my word. I got together with DEA, ATF, and FBI, and we formed the task force, and all the bad guys, the kingpins, we took them out. And when the community saw that, they said, wow, they gave the guys a chance to get out the game, and those that didn't get out, they didn't have any sympathy for us. So it was a win-win all the way around. So we were very, very, very instrumental. Because like I told them, I said, you can't ask these people to get out the drug game and don't give them something to take care of their families. And so we provided them avenue. And the greatest card that I ever got, that I kept with me, a guy named Corley, he got out of Angola Penitentiary. He went in there for murder. He said, "You gonna find somebody like me a job?" And I said, "I give you my word." And once he got his job, he gave me a card. He said, I never thought I would be writing this to a policeman. He said, you're a man of your word and a stand-up guy. Now I see why the streets respect you. So, like I said, even in the individual that was in the prison system, you had to look to them to help them because they were all part of the solution. You know, we didn't leave anybody, nobody was left behind, you know, because basically a lot of these young people, they idolize these gangsters. And once they saw them getting out the game and coming working with us, it had the ripple effect.
It essentially is what the focus and the goal of the Brothers Keeper initiative that came out of, I think it was Eric Holder's office that it was, right? That talked about, you know, embracing the family, identifying a young person who's going to be dead or in jail. And the church's role in that process was to embrace the family and you know, just get him out of the life. But I think the major role that faith has to play in this is to compel the political will. And we had a willing mayor. I don't know that, you know, you guys got a different politics and personalities and people. So I know this doesn't necessarily, you know, we're talking about gumbo, but gumbo is made in different ways, but the same ingredients applies. We've got pain, we've got people, we've got church, accountability, law enforcement, and city and municipal leaders who have the political will to do it. If they don't, then the role of the church, I think, is to force that political will.
So Joe, I've got some really good questions coming through, and we only have so much time. If you could maybe give us a 30-second response for each one of these, and so we can get through, and then we can open it up for comments. So here's one. Was there a role for the local prosecutor, and what was the level of buy-in?
I'll let Eddie take that. 30 seconds in.
Yeah, we basically had a direct line to the DA's office. I mean, it was a great partnership. We basically let them screen all the cases. We expedited a lot of our drug cases. And by me being a commander of the task force, I had a relationship before called commander of street crimes with ATF, DA, and FBI. They basically spearheaded our efforts to get the major drug dealers off the street. And so those big guys that we wanted to get off the street, give them big time, the DA's office acquiesced to the federal bureaus and the U.S. Attorney's office, and they actually got, I mean, major time. And that's one thing that you do to scare drug dealers, give them plenty of time and give them federal time. That's why we was able to basically modify a lot of drug trafficking we had at the major level.
Thank you. Is there a component in this program that will address social inequities on a systemic level that contributes to crime?
You know, I think Eddie talked about his individual efforts, but you know, this initiative by the churches was not solely focused on the development of proposals related to crime, but they also developed proposals related to minimum wage. They developed proposals around job development and job creation. They developed proposals around housing initiatives and housing inequities. So there again, the advocacy came to rest at the door of the church and the door of the faith community to raise and surface the issues relative to economic injustices, right?
Remember the home ownership program that developed at St. Peter Claver for low income housing, where basically they got a lot of blighted property from the community. They hired people within the community to renovate those houses. Then they sold it to people in the community at a very, very modest price. So that basically lays a standard of living to a lot of people. That was done through St. Peter Claver Church.
Right.
Here's there's some great comments, and I asked people to read the chat because, for instance, we have from ATF Tampa field office some really important information. But I think here's a good one from our NAACP representative. Do you have a model to work with cities where all the powerful, respected, and political groups work in a silo and leave out the grassroots organizers on the ground, community groups that do want change? In other words, Jacksonville, will this work?
You know, that is best answered by Jacksonville, right?
Yeah. Any responses from the audience? Can we make it happen here?
I think we can make it happen here. I think it's a matter of, I think a big question I had that I didn't write down is, you know, how did you get the federal government involved? How did you get the mayor to actually decide to come to one of these meetings? Was it just the, I guess, the atmosphere at the time, or the level of violence at the time was just overwhelming and that's why that happened? Or what steps did you take to get the officials that we need to make this change? How did you get them to show up?
Yeah, you know, listen, the faith community, you know, all of these politicians are sitting in somebody's church, usually on Sunday morning. They're there. And they usually come to, of course, they go to churches when they're running for office, right? So they recognize in the church, if they don't recognize the moral authority of the church, they at least recognize the fact that the voters are sitting in you know, in those pews. I mean, Alexis de Tocqueville described a democracy, the American democracy, as being, you know, a place where religion is going to hold for the moral standard. So they had to respond. They had to respond to the invitation. And when they didn't respond, it showed. We've had politicians and public officials who would not attend those meetings. And what those churches did was to set an empty chair in the front of the church with their name on it, and people remember them at election time, right?
A lot of them got voted out. A large number of them got voted out.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Another question, this again from Octavius Holliday, State's Attorney's Office. Did you have any issues with conflicting philosophies? For example, less jail time and more intervention versus harsher and longer sentencing?
Oh, it was the proverbial bureaucratic quagmire. You know, I took a lot of heat from a lot of my colleagues, but like I told them, I said, I came from public housing and I knew the problem from the bottom to the top. I said, you know, I'm gonna get a little, I did my research, I did my master's thesis on Sutherland's theory on social control, differential reinforcers, which is basically our whole criminal justice system is predicated upon that. You give a negative stimuli, which is jail, it should stop negative behavior. But recidivism being at all-time high, it didn't work. So there's another part of that they didn't look at, differential associations. Basically, you change individuals' peer groups and change their environment, and they'll have a great effect. So I got focus groups of juveniles. I gleaned a 50 questionnaire survey. I disseminated to 500 kids in our focus group. Then I put that information to an SPSS program. I looked at the multiple regression tables and prison correlations. Then I used Cronbach's alpha to check for significance and validity for scientific research. And it showed that differential associations, not different reinforcers, were the number one determinant for behavior among juveniles. So I was able to show them from a statistical standpoint, from an applicational standpoint. So every time they argued with me and tried to fight me, I had the stats from the surveys, and then I had the stats from the crime. And then another thing that I did a longitudinal research design to show the effects of our programs from an attitudinal standpoint as opposed to a crime standpoint. When we first took over, we had a 23% approval rating. 1 year later, after joining, I started putting our programs in place. We let the residents disseminate the pre-test and the post-test so it wouldn't be tainted. We had a 91% approval rating. So from 3 fronts, we did longitudinal research design, we did a statistical package of social sciences looking at Sutherland's theory and differential associations as opposed to differential reinforcers, and the crime actually went down. So even though they argued, it fell on deaf ears because I had the stats to back it up.
All right, thank you. And this one I will ask, let's see. Hold on, I want to get the right one here. Jacqueline, would you mind asking the question that you put in the chat? Because we do want to engage our younger people. in this conversation.
Sorry.
So go ahead.
It was kind of similar to Solomon's question. I've been working with my school, the University of North Florida, as well as the JAX Community Action Committee, and we've been trying to advocate for a review board for the police department in Jacksonville, but it recently disbanded due to them saying that the people advocating for it were emotional, and they basically didn't want to deal with the community and the responses that they were getting. And so I'm just not sure, because it seems like we really need their support, and I'm not sure how we can get their support if they're not willing to engage with us.
That's a great point. I want to say this because it's so timely. Last year, after the demonstrations around police conduct, after the George Floyd demonstrations, Eddie and I and former U.S. Attorney Kenny Politi, was former because he left when Trump got there, but then now he's up in Washington, now Assistant Attorney General. We went after the leaders of the organizations that led the major demonstrations. And what we were able to do, they began their discussions about police budgets, about defunding and others like that. But what they really wanted was to have some control over how mental health issues were handled, how they wanted a holistic approach to dealing with some of this. So what we had to do, we had to make sure that they understood that the target for their proposals had to be the municipal government. And I think it's the same in every city. Has to be the city council, has to be the mayor, right? When we're able to teach them that they were able to create the proposals they wanted to present, and they were able to present them to the city council in front of the U.S. Remember, Eddie, with the Criminal Justice Committee of the New Orleans City Council? Once they had their proposals together and they presented them at the city council during the pandemic, they secured out of 15 people on the board, to a community review board, they secured 7 seats, right? I guess what I'm saying to you is that young people want the same thing that we want. They want control. They want to be able to control and be a part of the discussion at the table with a meaningful voice. Right now, we're continuing to talk. Dennis is working with us. We've got students from Loyola University, from Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia. Today, we had a research action with the Georgia students to working with Ambassador Andrew Young, who was the former mayor of Atlanta, talking about the same thing you're talking about. We're teaching this model of organizing that the churches have been using, that Dennis and the Urban League in Jacksonville is just beginning to engage around, to teach organizing. You have to be able to propose something beyond protests. There's a next step. And when we teach the next step, how do you hold a city council accountable? What are the steps involved in the community organizing process? Then I think young people respond. They're responding now. Next summer, they're going to Washington, D.C. in a replication of the ride. They call it the Ride Revive. They're going to Washington, summer of 2022, student leaders from all across the country to talk about these issues of police suppression, voter suppression, and other issues like that. So they're using this model we're talking about, bringing people together. I'm sorry, I was a little winded, but that was a great question. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Megan, shoot, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. I just wanted to say hello and thank you so much for having me tonight. So my question is, with the current climate and the tensions between citizens and law enforcement becoming so increased lately, especially last year in 2020, becoming more publicized, how do you feel that this climate may influence or change your process in implementing something like this today?
You want me to take it?
Yeah, Eddie, you can go, but then I want to add something to that.
Well, when you look at it, it's no different than it was when we were there in the 90s. As a matter of fact, it was really worse because we had corruption at an all-time high, even though it didn't get the national publicity. But when you got the right people in place, you form those alliances, you build those trusts, and then basically solutions come. Joe?
You know, one of the organizing principles that we teach young people in my classroom, in Innovate Public School that Dennis has been working with, is that if you control the agenda, you control the outcome. And that what young people are looking at is when you can prove to them that their voice is heard, then you capture the trust and they're willing to invest in the process. I remember when the police officers, you remember a few years ago, there was a demonstration in Dallas, Texas, where there was a demonstration, but there was not a next step beyond that demonstration. There was not an agenda, there was not a proposal, but the danger is always when you don't have a proposal and when you don't control the agenda, that someone else will hijack your agenda. And what happens is that sometimes the violence occurs as a result. We saw the police officers killed in Dallas, Texas, when there was no thinking about the next step beyond the protest. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
I think the other thing, one last thing is that young people have to be a part of the process that you're creating now. And right now, we're insisting that young people be at the table. Otherwise, it's not it's not seen as legitimate in their right. That's why I'm so pleased to see Dennis's interns, because they're not the leaders of the future. I mean, they're the leaders today. I mean, they've proven that. When they took the streets over the past couple of years, they're the leaders of today.
Before I ask the next question, I would ask everyone who would like to work with us on this project to send me in the chat your name and just a cent. And I'm assuming I have your email address in the registration. It would be great to work with you. We can use all the help we can get. And we don't want to be the only one. We want to just be part of the organization that makes something happen and responds to those children that you heard that were speaking 40 years ago. But I'm sure we could find children today saying the same thing in our city. And we need to respond to those voices. I did want to ask Father Bach from the church perspective, how do you think Jacksonville would respond to a call? Obviously, iCare would be interested. What are your thoughts? And I know you have a background in conflict resolution, have a doctorate in it, so you're not uninformed in this regard.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. My response to your question would be a question to Dr. Joe and Edwin. Every city is unique. I don't know much about New Orleans, but I have driven through the city to Texas. New Orleans is unique. Jacksonville is unique. You know, in this type of project, politics is highly involved. I don't know the politics in New York, but I know a little in Jacksonville. Now, in America, unlike what I used to hear before I came to America, America is so much divided, you know? There are so many landscapes, you know? People think that they are Republican, conservative, Democrats, liberal. What I seem to see is that what Democrats say yes, the Republicans say no. What Republicans say yes, Democrats say no. Your project, just like one sister said, is what Jesus would do. and I very much appreciate that. But my problem is, if such projects, I do know that there is nothing we can do without challenges. There is nothing we can do without challenges. But would some politicians or some section of the society not say, we want to give handouts, or we are communists, or we are socialists, forgetting the fact that that is what Jesus will do, even within one church, within the Catholic Church, within the Protestant Church, within Christianity. We are so much divided. We don't want to do this because we make some people lazy. We don't want to do this because we deprive some people. So people, there is no unanimous support for any project. This is not what I used to read about America. So that is my concern, that is my issue, even though there are nothing you can do without challenges. We can overcome those challenges, but how can we? For example, you said, you invited politicians, when they do not come, you leave the seat empty. Sometimes the grassroots does not understand that, does not see that. But during election, some of them are voted for because of what they say or because of the political party that they belong to. How do we deal with that? But I do know that the church is for justice, the church is for righteousness, the church is for the poor. But then certain people, even in the hierarchy of the church, will think that you are making some people to be lazy, especially the less educated. Sometimes they are educated, but the way they talk shows they are not educated. So that is the problem. That's my challenge now.
So, Professor Givens, one of the thrusts of Father's message comment is, do we need it to be unanimous? Do we need, what's the tipping point to make something happen in the world that you profess and work in?
You know, I really believe that politicians respond to communities of faith not because they value the role of the church as being that it's a moral thing, it's a value thing. They respond to the church because they know that citizens of a city, citizens of a country are sitting in those pews. It's practical politics for them, right? So when you have organizations like the Urban League and the NAACP and civic associations, and then add that to the body of the church. And when we talk about the church, we're not necessarily talking about the Catholic Church. We're talking about, in that film, there were Catholics, Protestants, Jews, Muslims. Is there a tipping point? A tipping point is when a public official realizes that there's no way he's not going to respond. I've never seen it in 30 years of using this model of organizing, a politician sit in front of 1,000 people and say no to a proposal. I've never seen it. I've seen it one time. I'll tell you, one time I saw it in New Orleans shortly after Katrina. There were 1,000 people in the church, and the mayor at that time was Mitch Landrieu. Mitch Landrieu was asked to reduce jail sentences. They wanted people turned out of jail. Number one, it was a response to the mass incarceration issue. The reason he was able to say no to 1,000 people in that church was because, number one, the mayor was not the person with the authority and responsibility to address the issue. Number one, that was that. The second reason is because in New Orleans at that time, home invasions were at an all-time high. And on the front page of the newspapers in New Orleans, on that day that they had that action, 6 home invasions, was printed across. So people were saying, he was following the temperature. The temperature of people were saying, look, I want a safe community. I don't care about mass incarceration at this time because there were 2 home invasions in my neighborhood, right? So that was the only time in 30 years that I've seen a public official, a mayor, a city council person, reject a legitimate proposal presented to them in the church in front of 1,000 people or more. Never seen it happen. So if there's a tipping point, I say, Dennis, if you've got a building that's you remember, Eddie, you remember when the school board itself was challenged in front of 1,000 people at St. Gabriel Catholic Church? There was one person who rejected the proposals to all, 1 out of 10 rejected the proposal, and that person was turned out of office the next year. So, they recognize, they count votes, Dennis. They may not believe that the church has a right to hold forth that moral standard, but nevertheless, they're looking at people in the pews and saying, this church has 1,000 votes and I need them.
And those people in the churches, they vote. See, that's another thing. They have the voter registration records. They know who's voting and who's not. And so, and they're not asking for anything immoral. That's the thing. They're holding them accountable. And when you got that type of accountability, it's hard to say no. And Joe is correct. When that guy said no and he got voted out of office, that resonated citywide. That's when people really understood the power of ACT. That's when they really understood the power of ACT.
You got to unite the faith community, and then a few of then people from the state's attorney's office, from the U.S. attorney's office, from the police, the sheriff's office, have to decide where they're going to be. Like, I don't know much about your municipal government, other than the fact that I saw something where I was reading where they even decided they were not going to even have any more dialogue around police community relations.
Right. And even police were held accountable. We had a commander that basically told community groups, I work 9 to 5. If y'all want a meeting, it's got to be between 9 and 5. And they went up to City Hall and told Mayor Morial in no uncertain terms, they want him gone. And the next day I was promoted to that district as a commander. And so, so it's like that kind of like started my career. I was on the lieutenant's list. I was at the top of the lieutenant's list, and they found the money in the budget to make me a captain. And the next day I was a commander of that district, and the rest is history.
All right, well, thank you. Very inspiring presentation and your expertise. And I know that you haven't slept on this issue since you started.
No,
you're still doing the work today, and I admire you so much. I'm going to give the last word. I do want to sort of give a ending thank you, but I do want to ask Zoe Samuels, who's been working with us on this project, if you had any comments. Again, hearing from younger folks, I think, is important. As Professor Givens said, you are a leader of today. What are your thoughts?
So it's kind of something that I learned while I was in school. So I do have a bachelor's in criminology. So community policing is not something that I'm unfamiliar with. So I just think it's, something that needs to be done. Being able to bring a community together and, having people talk to each other and, point out things that are unusual. They say that urban communities are going to have higher crime just because of foot traffic and people coming in and out, and not having, a sensible community that each other and your neighbors. So I think, faith is something that does bring a lot of people together. And even though, things are changing within our generation, especially, I do think that maybe, yeah, faith is still something that young people believe in, but I do think it is something that is also a little bit of a sensitive topic nowadays. So I think that's something to think about when it comes to the younger generation, but I think it's a good starting point. It's and especially in Jacksonville is a smaller community. So I do think that, with smaller communities, it's easier to implement, and it's just a starting point. Start talking to people that are your neighbors. And once you build a community within your own neighborhood, it's easier to bring other people in. So I think it's a great program.
Thank you very much. Deborah, I know you had to leave, and I'm not sure you're still with us. Did you have any closing remarks on behalf of the NAACP?
On behalf of the Jacksonville branch of the NAACP, I would just like to thank the visiting audience for coming in to share with us the ACT program, and that programs do work, and we're open in Jacksonville to work with you, to work with any of the organizations, because we have various organizations at the grassroots level. I have also worked in public housing. I've worked with refugees. I've worked with low and moderate income families. I've done housing, economic development, as well as employment. So I would really like to just see how we pull all of these things together. The first thing I would like to see is how we deal with this employment issue and the job apprenticeship, how we get young people and ordinary people in our community into this new job situation that's coming. That's going to create some new things for us. We need to talk about how we integrate what we're doing right now with smart cities to make sure that everybody has access to broadband, because that is the way we're going to be communicating. So with that, whatever we can do at the NAACP here in Jacksonville, our Florida State Conference, we've already spoken with our president. We are definitely dealing with health, economic development, education, and employment. So anything that we can do in those areas, and anything we can share, our expertise at the national office is astronomical. And I think that some of our statistics, some of our data can be used to help us put together a strong program like your ACT program that fits what we do here in Jacksonville.
Thank you very much, Deborah. With that, we will close. I want to thank everyone for attending. It's amazing we haven't lost anyone through this whole presentation. It's a tribute to your concern and your passion for making a difference, and we really appreciate your being here. I also want to thank everyone for sending in their information in the chat. We will be getting back to you and putting together a working group that hopefully will bring in all aspects of the community so we can continue to work together, including folks from City Hall, so that we can make a difference and really move beyond the impasse that we seem to have gotten at. Another thank you for our special guests, Professor Givens and Chief Eddie, for being with us tonight and taking the time to be with us. We're so grateful for that. And with that, we'll close, and thank you on behalf of the Urban League. And once again, a shout out to our interns who make us so proud and so capable of doing anything at the Center for Advocacy and Social Justice. We couldn't do it without them. So thank you all. And this video will be available to you within 24 hours. So if you want to share it with other folks, we highly recommend that. So thank you.